Now, if you look at the computer functionality at a very high level, we have the input devices which takes the information from the outside world and convert that into the binary information. Then that information is further stored into the computer memory, which is called as a RAM. And then the computer CPU will take that information from the memory and it will apply an algorithm on top of that input and transforms that into a desired output format and stores back that into the computer's memory. Once the process is completed, which is storing back the desired output into the computer's memory, then the output devices will basically pick that information from the memory and converts that into the desired signal. If you take screen as an example, or a screen as an output device, or the monitor as an output device, the responsibility of the monitor is to display a characters or a set of symbols onto the screen. So if you look at the different input devices, we have several input devices: the keyboard of a computer, the touchpad of your phone, a camera, a microphone, sensors in a car, and the drone. Of course, the drones are also acting like input devices these days. There are several such other devices we have which will act like an input devices to a computer. Now, how does the information transfer from input through the computer till the output? Let's look at this with an example. So the step one is, as we already discussed, the step one is capturing the input. So for this, imagine that you have a keyboard which has a set of symbols on it, and I had pressed on a symbol B. Now what does a computer keyboard basically does is, it will convert that into a decimal number, which is called as an ASCII number. And that ASCII number is further converted into the binary information, and that will be stored inside the computer's memory. Once that information is stored inside the computer's memory, then the CPU will basically apply an algorithm or runs an algorithm on top of the computer's input that is being stored inside the RAM or the memory in the binary format, and it will basically calculate how to display the letter B pixel by pixel. So to do that, what does the CPU basically do is, it will ask the memory, like, how can I draw the B inside a memory? Now, upon getting, so it's basically the responsibility of the memory is to provide the set of instructions to the CPU, so that using those instructions, the CPU will draw the B inside the memory. Upon getting the instructions from the memory, then the CPU will run these instructions and store the results as a pixels in the memory. Finally, the pixel information has been sent in binary to the screen as an output. And the screen is the output device which converts the binary signal into the tiny lights and colors that makes up what you see. So now if you look at the output devices of a computer, the responsibility of this output devices is to convert the binary signal into an other form. Let's say if you take speaker as an example, the responsibility of the speaker is to convert the binary signal into an electronic signal, and that will be further converted into the form at which the human can basically understand that as an audio. And then we have 3D printers as act like an output devices, and the responsibility of the 3D printers is to take the binary signal and convert that into an object, and which can be printable onto a paper. And we also can consider the robotic arms as the output devices, and of course the motor of the car can also be considered as the output device. The more complicated tasks need more memory and CPU. The CPU and the memory are the two important components of a computer, which decides on the way how the computer performs a particular task. Typing a letter on a screen may be the easiest task. To do the complicated 3D graphics or record a high definition movie requires more CPUs in the memory. Modern computers often have multiple CPUs to process all the information and many GBs of data to store it. When it comes to the different types of memories, the computer usually has two different types of memories. The secondary memory, which is called as a disk, and the primary memory, which is called as a RAM. A disk is a primary storage in a computer. It is a persistent, meaning that it is persisted regardless of the state of a machine. So the computer has two states, the on and off. Even if the computer is turned off and turned on, the information that is being stored inside a disk will still exist. So the meaning of the persistent is regardless of the state of the machine. So most computers store the information in the disk on the order of the TBs, which is terabytes. So there are two types of disks. Traditionally, HDDs are used as a disk, which are called to be the hard disk drives, which has the mechanical component, which has a motor which rotates the disk, and there is a spindle which uses it to write that information onto the disk. As the disk keep rotates, the quality of the information that it stores into it will decrease. Sometimes the information that is being stored onto the disk may get corrupted because the disk may tear. But when it comes to the solid state drives, which are called as an SSDs, and it is being used as a disk in almost all the modern computers these days. This doesn't have the mechanical components, this has all the electronic components in it. So these are very expensive drives are the disks that comes along with the modern computers. So the time it requires for the CPU to write the data and read the data from a disk or onto a disk would be very high when compared to the RAM. Now the RAM, the random access memory, which is called the primary memory of the computer. So any program, for say you're trying to execute, or any sort of an application, for say you're trying to execute on a computer, that has to be stored inside the RAM, and then further it will be executed by the CPU. So it stores the data and the programs currently being used by the CPUs. And it's volatile, which means that once you turn off your computer, all the information that is being stored inside the RAM is gone. It's no longer exist. And the RAM sizes generally varies from the GBs. It's from 1 GB to 128 GB because RAM is much more expensive than the disk. The benefit is that reading and writing to the RAM is significantly faster than the disk. And it is important to note that the RAM and the disk do not communicate with each other. All the communication between these two has to happen through the CPU. So the RAM is called to be the memory of the computer. The CPU is the brain of the computer, and the RAM is considered as the memory of the computer. So that means that the CPU uses the memory, which is the RAM, to store all the temporary information it requires to store, or it requires to process.